do you think should be the steps to learn robotics when you're starting out and then
Hmm.
gradually throughout the journey itself?
A sort of reverse engineering approach that I slowly started recommending to a lot of juniors and peers is to first maybe understand what companies need when they say they want a robotics engineer. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to be working somewhere in that domain and you imagine yourself as a robotics engineer, go out there and look at job descriptions. Look at the skills that they're asking for. It's a very pragmatic way of approaching things, I feel, because any other way ends up being probably more self-serving and journey-ish than practical and things which would kind of land you, because a lot of the stuff will be things that you learn on the job, right?
Right.
So you first need to land that job. So you either approach it from a domain that you've already experienced in. Of course, you need to start with some sort of engineering, I would imagine. Um, One could argue that you could go from the entire liberal arts background and service the trolley problem for self-driving cars and look into the ethics of AI and all of that, if that's your speed. But if you're talking about, say, systems engineering, covering aspects of mechanical, electrical, electronics, embedded firmware, and computer vision, deep learning software, the kind of engineering we're talking about right now, you need to be relatively strong in one aspect, maybe enter into the workforce with that aspect, get exposed to the rest, and then sort of build up and find your way around what aspect of it is that you like and you enjoy or you want to do next. I feel like understanding which are the solved problems or which are the um, not so in demand skill sets for a particular role ends up being very grounding as well. Like, for
Mhm.
example, I remember almost being taken aback at the fact that I saw so many roles for robotics engineering, and I'd go and I'd know literally nothing on the requirements for that job because they would be totally focused on computer vision or deep learning or say navigation aspects. And it's
Mhm.
only in better companies I found that the job role itself does not end up being that ambiguous. They would specify that they're looking for somebody for navigation, somebody for controls, somebody for firmware, somebody for all the different parts. So I think an overarching advice would be don't think you can be all of those at once. Try to at least go to the depth as much as possible through your own personal projects or whatever to have decent skills in one aspect of it, enter with that, gain experience in that, and in parallel start exploring the others.
Right.
And yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
so
And for exploration, I feel like while we dissed a bit on the online coursework and the MOOCs that we mentioned, but they serve as a very interesting or a very educative tasting platter, if nothing else. Like you at least get a feel for the domain to understand if this is what you want. Is this is the problem that you want to be breaking your head on for say a week or a month?
what I usually think about learning in robotics is that more than anything else, you have to start working on projects. They can be simple projects, they can be whatever you want, but working on projects brings a lot of clarity and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things you have not even thought about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think working on projects, and the best case scenario would be you working on projects with people who are working in this domain. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if you're a student, more than doing university courses, of course, do your courses, do whatever you want there. Uh, Working with a professor who works in this
Mm-hmm.
domain is
Yeah.
a brilliant thing to do. You see a lot of things, you get access to a lot of resources. So that works well in your favor, and that usually is a game changer. You
Mm-hmm.
get exposed to all of this and then you learn things on the fly, because starting out you don't know a lot of things. Well, robotics is a domain where at least I always think that there is still a world to learn, right?
Yeah.
Like you always are at 1% of the like
Mm-hmm.
the entire thing. But working with people changes everything. I took a similar path as you, where when I wanted to move to robotics properly, I looked at job descriptions and I saw
Mm-hmm.
things I had no clue about, and I still applied for them. Okay, and one of the companies gave me an interview. It was the HR round, and then the first thing that guy says is, "Yeah, we have a lot to talk about." And his next question was, "Have you worked with Ross?" I said, "No."
Mm-hmm.
So he immediately went blank, and then he said, "Okay, what have you worked on?" So I had worked on like hardware engineering for robotics and stuff, but uh, it was still very different from what a robotics engineering profile would want. And then
Mm.
he was like, is this not going to work out? And I said, thank you so
Mm.
much. Now I know what I want to learn. And then I went back.
Yeah.
I did online courses on that. So I learned ROS from
The
Udacity.
construct.
And then, so gradually things build up based on reverse engineering like you did. So I
Mm.
did a similar thing. Uh, but in the end, if you're working with people, you just get exposed to all of this. And I know like learning in robotics is tricky. I mean, at least I found
Mm.
it back then. It took me a long time to figure out a way, and that was basically working with people for
Mm.
free as well. uh that I was able to like find my way to this. People honestly don't like the idea of working free at all. I'm just a, it's just a weird thing to me. I
Mm.
understand that like you should not work for free, but the thing is,
Mm.
you want to learn something and you have almost no skills there. Why would someone pay you if you're not bringing anything to the table? I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
if they do, it's great, right? That's the best place to
Yeah.
be. But having that high sense of ego when you have no skills to show is,
Yeah.
I don't think, the best way to go about it. Of course, as long as you can afford it and as long as you're privileged. If you're not,
Yeah.
there are some issues there. Of course, I mean, you cannot do it. But that's
Yeah,
how I.
but then if you go into like a bigger company, you most probably would have better work-life balance and you'll have more spare time to divert your efforts into learning what the domains that you're interested in as well,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because I think the other aspect of what you're saying is that things have gotten so much better. They're only getting more and more better in terms of being able to run simulations on the cloud, run a totally online platform like the Construct Sim or like a couple of others, wherein you need not even spend nights setting up things on your own machine in terms of the tool chains to actually learn about this stuff,
Right,
wherein there's enough resources to learn the basics of Python or C++ or C in that case. And even with something as simple as Python, go into the depth of the algorithms and the concepts that become relevant for, say, navigation, path planning, computer vision, state estimation, and localization, and things of that sort. So I feel curation becomes a problem quite often because there's so many resources out there. And I've seen your videos on YouTube, and I think your intent is also to kind of start curation in this domain where there is a scarcity of it, which I think is great. But yeah, in general, I think um, there's a lot that you can do with internet access on a moderately decent machine
right.
than you could maybe even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think it's a good time to be alive and to divert
Absolutely.
resources and energy. And if you're patient with yourself and also very ballsy, I think you can be rewarded in very interesting ways. An example I love is this guy we have for who's working with us as a mechanical engineering intern and now a full-time person, was literally walking on the street, saw my company's board, got interested, walked inside, said, I want an internship here. And I don't know about big companies, but startups really value that level of initiative.
So work with
And
people is something I say, right? Like this is an
yeah,
example of that changed his
yeah,
trajectory, right?
yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, I think the best open secret in the world of startups and job hunting is that most people will either not have the job descriptions online or have accurate job descriptions online because of various reasons. And it's never a bad idea to just ask and try to have a very simple conversation and just reach out on LinkedIn, say you like this work, this is what you've done, and is there an opening? Because you never know when that timing might click.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you also have to understand how it's never not so often about being good enough in the domain as it is about being a good fit, because
Exactly.
I'm in a position where I end up having to interview even people who are veterans in the industry who have 15 years, 20 years of experience, 10 years of experience for senior firmware roles. And what I end up learning is that just because they have 10, 12 years of experience doesn't mean they're necessarily suited for the kind of work we do, where it ends up being so diverse in terms of the frameworks we work with, the technologies we work with, and the kind of environment or mindset you need to be in to always constantly be a learner. Like that
Exactly.
learner mindset does not come naturally to people, and one might even argue that it gets worse the more deeper you go into just one domain,
Hmm.
right? So you there are of course exceptions, and there are of course a lot of people who constantly are on the lookout for learning new technologies, and their history ends up being that diverse. But I'm just saying there's multiple ways of getting there, and as a fresher, as somebody who's new to the domain, other than the learning aspect of the skills required or the jobs required to execute the job, a lot of these tiny aspects are also things which come over time, over rejections. You send 400 emails, you get 10 responses.
Hmm.
One of those ends up being a job offer, if at all, and things of
Yeah,
that sort.
yeah, that's true. But I think the both of us agree that based on our experiences, a good strategy is to leverage whatever online resources you have,
Mm,
online resources plus university resources you have, to
mm,
understand these different pieces of the puzzle. And in parallel or just after that, uh, usually in parallel, find an opportunity to work with people. It could be
yeah, of
any
course.
sort of opportunity, and that is
Yeah.
when you see these things coming together, and you understanding what part you like more, or like what parts you like more. And
Mm,
then you are exposed to different frameworks, different technologies there, state of the art things, things you should not do as an engineer. So a lot of learning comes from real life
mm,
experiences, and that is built on
yeah.
top of you on your own trying to get these pieces of this big puzzle. And of course, I don't think robotics is a domain where you can ever say that, hey, I think I'm good, like I've learned enough. It's just that
Yeah.
you're
The,
always,
the insecurity never goes away.
yeah, I mean, you're always learning, and you're always like, hey, there is so much stuff to understand. Like I've just touched the domain superficially. For people who find this idea exciting, it is a beautiful domain. Like you're gonna learn for
Mm.
a long, long, long time, and hopefully for a lifetime.
One thing which I wish people had told me was try to pursue projects which take time and last very long. What I mean
Hmm.
by that is, uh, beyond a point, personal projects get you only so far.
Yeah,
If you can, try to get on board like an open source project with a lot of people smarter than you sometimes working on that with you. Because when you go to a company or you work on anything worth doing, quite often it's not a rockstar coder who gets it done, it's a rockstar team who gets it done. And you will never have all the skill sets. You need to be conversant in enough domains to understand the challenges, root cause something, maybe look at a problem from different angles. But you will always have to work in a team which brings together expertise from different domains and different years of experience to actually get the job done. Because that's the nature of development in the real world for any complex problem. And I feel like that's something that we're not taught, or that's not highlighted enough, that eh, the amount that you learn from actually sticking to a project for 6 months is a lot more than doing six projects which are 1 month each.
definitely. And in fact, in robotics, I think when you're working on a product, 6 months is also like too short a duration to
Yeah, yeah, of
have a
course.
deeper understanding of anything.